Hello everyone, it's David again. I'm going to be doing Season 1 of Babylon 5, Episode 18, Part 1 and Part 2, titled A Voice in the Wilderness. So, thankfully I won't be having to take as long on these kind of commentaries, because as you get further and further into this story arc, there's, things tend to get wound down instead of, back up. And plus there's, there's, 25, almost going on 30 years of memes now that have come out about Babylon 5. So that's kind of why my stories take so long, is because, we've had almost 3 decades to digest and process what's going on. And so you're going to have a lot of material out there. And so that's why it's like, dude, why are you taking so long to cover, 45 minutes of a television show? Well, we've had 35 years to digest the material and to come out with memes and all kinds of other things. So that's why it seems to take so long. But anyways, the nice thing is now that we're setting the story arcs in motion, I don't have to, explain a lot of things until they wind down, which thankfully they're not going to all wind down at once, Battlestar Galactica. So, we start off, elderly looking Minbari is looking for Delenn, and he needs directions. And so this guy says, well, I'll help you, and they take off. We all of a sudden blank on over to a shuttle going down to Epsilon 3. They've been looking for anomalies. They've been having earthquakes and stuff. Well, Epsilon 3 is supposed to be completely devoid of life and technology. We switch on over to Talia Winter. She doesn't want to get on the tube because every time the tube door opens, Michael Garibaldi is always there. Commander Sinclair, Mem Alert, says Michael Garibaldi may be many things, but he's not omniscient. Well, as soon as the tube opens up, who is there but the nice smiling face of Michael Garibaldi? Talia says, I think I'll take the stairs, and Commander Sinclair is creeped out as well, and he says, I'm going to join you, girlfriend. As we're going along, she goes on back to the shuttle, and this beam all of a sudden just knocks the shuttle out. And what the hell's going on here? This planet's supposed to be dead. Well, we cue over to the entrance. And we start to meet a guy named Draal. His name does become very familiar, or used quite a bit in latter episodes, and it will become evident at the end of this 2 episodes mini arc why. As we go on, Draal is on there, and Delenn is about to key herself into her room, and Draal says, quick, what is the 3rd rule for sentient life? And she turns around and says, Draal, and recognizes this guy, and he is wrong. Incorrect, he says. Now, the 3rd rule of sentient life becomes heavily memmed, so I had, stupid me, put it on later on in my notes, but the 3rd rule, principle of sentient life is its capacity for self-sacrifice for a cause, a loved one, or a friend. That also becomes heavily memmed. Don't know why I waited so long to write it down, but that's what happens sometimes. You get lots of all kinds of things coming at you at once. I was probably on eBay setting up. I also collect old coins and stuff that I sometimes sell. That's probably what I was doing. All of a sudden now, here is this beacon emanating from Epsilon 3. Now, what the hell is that? I mean, this place is supposed to be dead. There's supposed to be no technology down there, and all of a sudden, there's this beam emanating out towards the stars. And we also find out that there's been no news from Mars Colony. Usually there's something in ISN or if there was some kind of military exercises, Babylon 5 would have been informed. And so Ivanova makes that notation to Commander Sinclair. Let's see here. They all of a sudden, as they were talking, they flash over to an ISN report, and Mars is now in open revolt. And it's one of their threats that Free Mars is making. The sands will run red with Earther blood. And you will also encounter that mem quite a bit, Earther blood. That there is a distinct dichotomy between people born on Mars and people born on Earth. And they're starting to make those sorts of, distinctions now. That people who are born on Mars are now somehow different than, and you can see, things like the United States, our early colonizing days with our 13 colonies. We became very succinctly different from our former British overlords, if you want to say. That might be a little bit too, a little bit too harsh to call them that, but back then they might have said so. That here is this organization 6,000 plus miles away, and it seems to be the farther away the government is, the less responsive to their needs. Now, make a notation that I was born and raised, as I'm sure you probably guessed by my t-shirts, I was born and raised in Alaska, the 49th state. We were thousands of miles away from the lower 48, the mainland, whatever you want to call it. And we were constantly reminded of our differentness. Hawaii, I talked to many people from Hawaii, they have the similar problems. For instance, we would go to, and this was in the 1980s, 70s and 80s, we would go to order products out of catalogs. And we would constantly get these letters, I'm sorry, we don't deliver outside the United States. You have got to be kidding me. And so we would have to write them back, sorry, but we are part of the United States. We're 49 of the 50-state union. Send us our damn parka or whatever it is the heck we ordered. And we got that all the time. People would ask me, what kind of currency do you use? I'm not kidding you. And our governments, thousands of miles away, well, people would say, oh, we need to close off all the parks, or we, throw all the miners out because, we got to save all this territory for the future. Well, but you're basing it off of what's going on in the lower 48. Now that I live in Oregon, I see that there literally is a city of 1,000 or more people every time you turn around. In Alaska, you're lucky if a city of less than 100 people exists, and it is not uncommon. And so the wildlife has much more area to roam and grow big. I got into it with my oldest sister. We were moving down here, and I said, oh, look, Dee, there's a cute baby moose. And she goes, David, that's not a baby. And I said, but it's so small. And she started laughing. David, that's how big they grow down here. She goes, it's not like Alaska where they just grow up to huge, ginormous sizes. Now, I'm not suggesting that we open up all the parks in Alaska and allow all these corporations in to do whatever, but it's a government that's over 6,000 miles away, and Babylon 5 in Mars Colony speaks a lot to me about that. People say, well, you got all this equipment and you got all this, stuff to dig up the gold, and you get all this stuff to dig up or dredge for the oil and stuff like that. And we just want to come in and basically take the oil, take the money from it, and go on about our merry way. Well, what about the local communities surrounding this area? What do you want to do for them when you're gone? So, this episode speaks a lot to me, and it's two parts about a government that is so far away. We had that same problem when we were the original 13 colonies, and now it seems they're having the same problem in 2258, that there's a government far away not responsive to their needs, or at least that's what they feel on Mars. So, let's see here. All of a sudden, Sinclair's getting undressed, and this emanation appears and says, "Help me." Now, I can tell you as a registered nurse, if an emanation appears before you and says, "Help me," and then disappears, pick up the phone and please call and get a really good psychiatric evaluation. Because if you can see them, hear them, talk to them, and they start answering back, it's time to call your therapist. Okay? We also are reminded that Sinclair was born on Mars. As you know, Ivanova was very despondent over the news about an open revolt. I mean, these are human beings too. You know, and we had the same problem when we were in open revolt. You know, we were British citizens at that time too, and we were British citizens killing other British citizens or German mercenaries, or you know, that sort of thing. But that was, 300 years, 1776. My math is terrible. Anybody who wants to correct me, please go ahead and then tell me what a moron I am that I can't remember. Anyway, Delenn talks with Draal, and he's talking about his time on Minbar and how even before the current dichotomy or split between, and they still haven't explained where the worker caste has gone, but the military and the religious class, the chasm's growing deeper. And he senses that. But even before that, he senses. And so he talks about, "I'm going to the sea." And you're too young to go to the sea. Now, I'm not quite sure if they're talking about an old. There's this thing that when old Eskimos die, they get on an iceberg and they go out to the sea and die. Now, I'm from Alaska. My oldest niece is part Yupik Eskimo. I don't know where people get that from because I've never heard of it, but okay, I guess he's talking about, and he just wanted to come by and say goodbye to his old friend Delenn. He's kind of longing for a purpose later in life. Now, I don't know if you'd call that a midlife crisis or if that's a late life crisis, because I think Minbari lived to be about 150, if I remember right. But it sounds like that's what he's going through. And we flip on over to Michael Garibaldi. Can't get through to Mars, even though he's a high-level security guy. He still doesn't have enough security to get through Mars, so you know things really have to be bad when a chief of one of Earth's most important stations still can't get through. Ivanova briefs the shuttle crew about what they're supposed to go down to or actually do on Epsilon 3, and this time they send some fighters, because the last time I think, I can't remember if this is the first time they had, but you'll find out that they have some missiles and beams and other things that'll shoot them out of the sky. Michael Garibaldi ironically tells Talia, his erstwhile love interest, about a lady named Lise Hampton on the Mars colony, and her name becomes extremely important later on in the story arc, especially in season 5. So, talks about her on Mars colony, how they split up because he wanted to go to Babylon 5, she wanted him to stay at home. And so he said, Psychor has a training center on Mars. Can you get through? And she goes, I don't know anything about it. He goes, well, trust me, Talia, I'm in the security business. There's something there. Go. Can you take a look? And she goes, okay, since we're kind of buddies now, I guess I'll go look into it for you. That would, for any of the ladies here, or if your love interest started to ask you about a former love interest, wouldn't that kind of freak you out a little bit? Like, why are you after me when you want to talk to her? When the poop hits the fan, you're, or have any of you had that situation before where you're in a relationship with someone and all of a sudden they express, longings for their former lover? That kind of, yeah. So anyway, this time the shuttle, as we flip on over, is attacked by missiles from Epsilon-3. This was after the shuttle commander kind of got a little bit excited and went down below where the fighters could follow him, and against Ivanova's direct order. Well, their shuttle got hit with the missile. Ivanova has the fighters shooting down, covering fire basically, so that the missile can zoom back up. And Ivanova, and I'm not going to repeat this mantra because it's been meant to hell and back, and you can find snippets of it on YouTube. It's the Ivanova is God mantra. So, and it talks about, basically ends with Ivanova is God. Ivanova is God. She switches off the communications grid in a hurry. She zips around and stares at the other people at CNC, who quickly go about their business, and because the second in command is ticked off because they wouldn't listen to her. Well, in the debriefing, these shuttles find a base 5 miles down inside of Epsilon-3. The initial scans of Epsilon-3 were down to only about 2 miles. Well, they didn't go far enough, and we find that there's evidence of at least artificial intelligence down there. So, as we flip on over, Garibaldi's at the bar, and he's drinking this drink called water because he has a history of alcoholism. Mollari says, alcohol or water, never touch the stuff myself. He orders his usual, and he goes into the "it can't be that bad" encounter where he talks about coming into contact with a female dancer and getting married to her, and then waking up and finding out she wasn't quite what he thought she was. So, Garibaldi says, "You kiss me and I'll punch you." And Londo says, "We're not that close, Mr. Garibaldi." As they're walking away, Garibaldi is forced to pay for Londo's drink. You'll find that very common theme, that Londo is good at getting other people to buy his drinks and stuff. Do any of you know someone like that? I know someone who's just good about getting the free drinks at the bars. No one's ever, in fact, I'm the one who usually buys the free drinks. But, that's what happens when you gain weight in college and all of that good stuff. But I'm not going to bore you to death with my life story, because quite frankly you would shut this off, unsubscribe, and block me. Which, anyway, as Londo was going around from getting his free drink, there's an apparition, the same one that encountered Sinclair. We flip on over. Sinclair and Ivanova descend into Epsilon-3. They're on board a shuttle, and they zip on down to Epsilon-3, and sure enough, an artificial landing pad appears. And that's also memmed a little bit there. But as they're going in, Ivanova finds a huge machine going miles in each direction. Now, as you go through, take a look at the CGI on this one, because it's where the 90s kind of meets its limits. You'll see, especially when they're trying to do Epsilon-3 itself, and all of a sudden you see grid patterns everywhere. Take a look at some of that too. You'll notice a lot of where the CGI meets its limitations in this one. Now, a question for anybody who's better at this sort of thing. I'm the kind, I've probably said it before, I'm the kind that has to read the instructions to find the on-off button on a computer. So if anyone who is better at this sort of thing can clue me in, What do you think the CGI? Do you think that's going to be better than the 1990s version? Will it be able to fix that sort of thing that we see? Because if I remember right, my version on the DVDs was actually supposed to have fixed at least part of that sort of thing. Now we had come flash on over to Londo Mollari's quarters, and Delenn and her buddy Draal come in on Londo Mollari, and Londo is studying Earth culture. This is probably one of the most men things in Babylon 5, and I'll try and do it without making you put your fingers in your ears and head for the volume. Okay? Londo Mollari starts singing the Hokey Pokey. Now, for those of you who are not into American culture, it's Hokey, separate word Pokey. And if you just can't stand my singing, go YouTube it. Very common at ice rinks and also at roller skating rinks. And here it goes, my small rendition. You put your right arm in, you put your right arm out, you put your right arm in, and you shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about. And there are various body parts and stuff, and it depends on how many people fall down during the rendition of this as to how long it takes. But Google it if you have not lost your sense of hearing. Of course, that also might be the pandemic. We'll just blame it on that. But anyway, and he says, I swear to you, it does not mean a thing. As he's, much more dramatic than I just did it. Much more mem-worthy than I just did it. So, as they go around, this apparition contacts Ivanova and Sinclair, and they find the control room for this being that's hanging almost like in a crucifix kind of a pose. And we find that a little bit later that the guy's name is Varn. It's wonderful, memorative names that, you only see them in one episode. So that's why I'm flipping back through my notes. It's like, it's not like Sinclair, Ivanova, or even Draal that appears in. It's just one episode, and that's it. They take Varn back on a shuttle to B5. They aren't shot down because Varn has temporarily disabled that part. A large ship all of a sudden comes through the vortex, and Michael Garibaldi explains what the hell, and to be continued. Goes across, the nice thing is, because it's on my DVD set, I don't have to be continued next Friday or whatever week-long schedule it was, because I can just hit play again and go on to part 2. As recap of part 1, it's Michael Garibaldi exclaims, what the hell? All of a sudden, an Earth Alliance heavy cruiser, the Hyperion, comes through the jump gates. And they are like, guys, nice to see you, but what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. Hyperion, the commander there, he likes his rank, evidently, and he is going to assume control. Against what? Well, what happens if the aliens discover this, this amount of technology down there, and they want to come and take it, and they get tired of you saying, no, I'm here to provide muscle and backup. Well, my understanding is, especially in military parlance, that is stepping on someone's toes big time. And if someone in the military can clarify that one for me, it'd be like if all of a sudden an Army general starts giving a Navy admiral orders on what to do. My understanding is that's just not done, but Dr. Franklin, we zip on over, is caring for the alien in MedLab. Sinclair ends up going to meet this Captain Pierce, and Captain Pierce is one of those a show of force is required kind of dudes. They shoot first and ask questions later kind of guy. Now, you can imagine what kind of problem that can cause on board a diplomatic station, especially when it's in neutral territory. And technically nobody has jurisdiction there. So, but the nice thing is we all got to buy these little Hyperion heavy cruiser models at the model shops. Question, how do you guys think they're also going to monetize this new series? Do you think they're going to have like new space stations and new characters and stuff? Warner Brothers is going to bring all that stuff back? Or are they going to bring back the original Babylon 5 and renew it? Or are they going to take the brand new Babylon 5 and just go from there? We flip on over to a bar patron. One of these guys at the bar who can't keep his yap shut. Garibaldi is there, I'm not sure for what reason, but all of a sudden this bar patron says, "Yeah, start cracking some heads, man." He's one of those guys that either, spent like a week in the military and got washed out, but he's one of those that's like, rah, rah, and then you realize, like some of these people that go to these protests and then you realize they're not military at all. In fact, they've been denied for one reason or another, like their psychiatrist told them to stop seeing aliens at the middle of the night before we'll give you a gun. Anyway, Michael Garibaldi, his erstwhile wannabe wife, Lise Hampton, is there, and this guy's cracking fun of, we should just start throwing more bombs, gets on Garibaldi's last good nerve, and we see Michael Garibaldi grabbing him behind the head and trying to do a magic trick with his head slammed through a bar table. Heavily memmed, why I mention it. And of course, not always good for a police officer to be doing that. We talk about police violence. Oh boy. Michael Garibaldi's not showing good for the force, I guess. Hyperion decides they're going to launch their own shuttles, and of course they're shot down. And Sinclair and Ivanova come up with a ruse that they had a jamming device on board, which is why, of course, we all know they had Varn on board, which is why they weren't shot down, but the less Captain Pierce knows, the better. All of a sudden, they increased quakes are on Epsilon 3, and if they continue, Babylon 5 will end up being destroyed in 48 hours. So they're trying to make plans on what to do. Well, I guess Hyperion would be good. They showed up then because they can help evacuate people. As Mollari is going down the hallway, he confronts Ivanova about what she found down there. And she says, "Do you really want to know what's going on down there?" And he says, "Yes, of course I do." And she goes, "Boom! Boom, boom, boom! Boom!" And he says, "You can never get an honest answer from anyone around here these days." Heavily memmed, why I mentioned that. Draal ends up getting confronted by Varn and kind of barges his way into MedLab to talk to Varn directly. Now, having been a nurse, and I always mention this, why these aliens can all of a sudden go in front of a methane atmosphere and their skin or eyes don't burn out, I have no idea, but what the hell, it's science fiction, not science fact. We go in, and Michael Garibaldi is talking to Sinclair, and Sinclair makes Garibaldi promise that on the last shuttle out, Ivanova will be there, whether he has to force her or not, and Garibaldi promises Sinclair that Ivanova will end up on the last shuttle out. It's one of those, and Garibaldi even asks a little bit, everybody's lost somebody, but were you ever afraid you made a mistake in letting them go? I get this itch for one of my exes, Curtis. We dated for a while, about a year and a half. It was like a perfect on and off again relationship where I was too far into my alcoholism and he was so far into his cocaine addiction that we couldn't make it work, and so it blew up. We went our separate ways. But I always wonder what happens, and of course the last time I ever heard anything about him, They were running insurance agency in Beaverton, Oregon. So every once in a while I get the hankering, but have you ever had one of those relationships you just couldn't, you just wanted to know whatever became of this person? You know, of course, with the fool's hope that we can make it work eventually one of these days. All of a sudden, an alien ship comes through. It's big, it's huge, and it uses a high-powered beam and it scans their language base. They state to Babylon 5 and to the Hyperion that they've been searching for Epsilon 3 for 500 years. And they threaten Babylon 5, if you don't get out of here within X number of hours, we're going to blow you up. Hyperion gets on the horn and says, well, I've got a big ship too, and I've got a space station, and I'm going to blow you up in 1 hour. It was like, I think 10 hours for the alien ship, and he wants to do it in 9. Ivanova says, worst case of testosterone poisoning I've ever seen, in reference, I don't know if it's reference to Captain Pierce or to both captains, because he's an alien. I don't know what gender he would, or she would, or they would be, so we'll just stick with Captain Pierce. Heavily manned, why I mention it. Turns out that Draal and Sinclair have been seeing Varn in their visions, and ends up Delenn and Draal also talk with Mollari, and they've all been having. Now, when I said earlier, call your therapist, if a group of you start seeing the vision at the same time, I guess you're technically not insane then. Unless it's just one person convincing the other 3 or 4. But if you've all seen them at different times at different places, I guess you're not. I guess that gets you off the insane diagnoses. And then on. Well, would it be a mass hysteria then? Anyway, they talk about maybe because he's familiar with the third principle of sentient life. We find out as Mollari is taking off with Varn, Delenn, and Draal, that he read the raid on Follis 12, and he kind of circles and gets his way in between this alien ship and the Hyperion firing on him. And Michael Garibaldi decides to get in a shuttle and chase behind him. And I'm not sure why, maybe tech runners or something, I think he says, but anyway. Now we've got all these shuttles trying to make it down to Epsilon 3, and only one of them has Varn on it. And a nice big space battle. Now, if you guys enjoy space battles, okay, if any of you know of anyone who enjoys space battles, okay, clue them in. It's a good, nice little one to watch. They have a nice little space battle. Another one, thing, I have this problem with watching sci-fi with medical friends is Delenn has a nice little nasal cannula for breathing. It doesn't protect her eyes or anything else, and this oxygen or atmosphere is like over 90% inert gases. But Draal makes a nice little place for them, or not Draal, but Varn makes it so that they can all breathe. Sticks Draal in there. Draal is starting to take over everything, and he's starting to get the hang of what's going on. He uses a massive holographic projector to talk to all the warning parties, saying that this technology here is not for any one single person or race, and if you come down here and try and take it, I'm going to have nasty surprise waiting for you. Well, these aliens not getting the hint to try and go down there, and all of a sudden this horrendous looking beam comes out and fries them. And I mean just vaporizes them. Just no chance of survivors, you know. I didn't know that the Minbari were that vicious, but there you go. The whole race now, as soon as Varn dies, is now extinct, I guess. But there you go. Let's see here. It kind of winds down. Michael Garibaldi gets back, and Sinclair gets him a secure line to Mars, and he talks with Lise Hampton. She's now married to a guy named Franz and expecting a baby. And that will become important later. Delenn tells Michael Garibaldi that Sinclair's destiny lies elsewhere. And of course, we find that out. Actually, in not too many more episodes, we find that out. And it ends with Michael Garibaldi shaking his head, saying, Franz, what the hell kind of a name is Franz? And we close out this scene. So, anyway, have any of you had one of those toxic relationships you just couldn't quite let go of? And also, what do you think about the Hokey Pokey? Any of you want, just hit pause, go watch the Hokey Pokey, and tell me what you think about it. Anyway, hope you all have a good rest of the day. I'm actually recording this on a Sunday, so hope you all have a good end of your weekend like I did. Got lots of things done around the house. Oh, and you guys might start hearing some weird sounds coming from behind me. My cat is back there, and she snores louder than a damn bear. So, it's obviously not me snoring. I'm wide awake talking to you.